wanted to introduce a project that I've been working on before I get too far so I can actually have a before and after. This is the before, and we're in a sassafras grove that also has black locust and some really beautiful hickories, and mostly honeysuckle and that's Lonicera morowii, grape, and American hazelnut understory. And I'm just working now on cutting channels to walk through here. It's also a nice big apple I want to save. But this area, I want to thin some of the sassafras out, top some of the sassafras, top the black locust, really bring the hickories up to the forefront because they're being suppressed quite a bit. So find whatever hickories are here and help them. Here we've got two nice big ones and a little one. And so I would try to, got some garbage to clean up, of course. Can't go anywhere on this farm without cleaning up some garbage. I'll probably try to graft, maybe I'll leave one natural and graft the other. And then there's another two over there. And the tool kit that I use here is machete on this side, a long machete. This is a 24-inch. And then pruners and a saw. And with that, you can really make pretty fast progress through this kind of area. Right now, I'm just chopping and leaving everything on the ground. And I will be planting in here in the fall or spring as well. So anyway, that's just an overview. I'm not going to do too much on it right now, but I just wanted to have this sort of before-ish picture. Well, this is a little bit of work in there. This is what it looked like before opening it up to be able to move really and see what's there. And so it goes from that side on the north and a couple hundred feet that way. Very dense stand. And on the other side is the farm field, so it's open on the other side. And want to plant more nut trees, basically. Pretty much nut trees and a couple fruit trees in here. Quick update on this project. So the first step really has been to get the shrub layer, the basically honeysuckle, mulched onto the ground. And I just only used a machete for all that. Some of this is the first growth of a honeysuckle, and then that fell down a few years ago, and then a new one grew out of the stem there. And so that's the story with a lot of these. So this shrub is adapted to growing, falling over, and stump sprouting. So what I'm doing now because I'm not ripping the roots out, will give them another rejuvenation next year, but it won't be so strong because the first two flushes happened when this canopy was much less dense and much less tall, so there was more light getting to the ground. So they'll come back, but not that much, and that's okay because they're fading out. So I'm favoring the hazels that are already here. I'm going to plant in some more hazels, and that we'll head towards that being the main understory crop. And then I'll be releasing this and all the other hickories that are in this grove, might graft some of these. This one will probably graft because it's not that big yet. I can bring it down and graft it. Black cherry is fading. It's a pioneer tree, and it can be an over canopy tree, but this one is not going to be. So I'm going to take that down. And probably going to thin out much, not all, of the sassafras. That's going to be a major component. But anyway, this fall I'm going to be doing some thinning on the big tall trees, the locusts, the sassafras, and reducing that to, you know, the recommended 20% for the top strata, and then somewhere in there, and then planting in 2 or 3 rows of trees into here. And yeah, the first thing to do over the winter is to get those big ones down. I could do it now, but the winter might be a little bit easier. And yeah, anyway, that's how it's coming along. At least now I can walk and see what's going on. There isn't a whole lot of garbage in this zone, so I can get access to clean that up. And yeah, it's changing pretty quickly now, although this is really just the first little exploratory endeavor. We've got some pretty big locusts to deal with, and the sassafras. So it's been a few months since the summer beginning of this project, and just wanted to do a summary of where I am now and where it's going. My initial idea was to do a thinning and pollarding and topping, and having spoke with a few agroforestry experts from around the world, I was convinced in a very clear way that it'd be better to do a patch cut here, clear out all the stems, organize the material, and replant. And it seems a little bit destructive, but ultimately these are all deciduous trees, and no tree was actually killed in all this felling because they're all going to resprout, and they're all early secondary species, meaning they're pioneer trees. And what we're sort of mimicking here is the hurricane or the big storm and or megafauna that come in and really knock those pioneer trees down once they've entered into senescence. And these trees had all for sure entered into senescence. With black locust, you can really see basically the amount that they grow every year increased for a while, and then their rate of growth sort of tapered off as the forest, as the patch kind of closed in on itself, because these are all species that need a lot of light, and they were getting crowded out, and that's fine. But what we want to do is move succession along quickly and plant in the species that we want as production species. So what you see here is one, we got a pile of garbage to deal with, of course. On any farm, anytime you do a project, you find garbage. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of planting beds. So this here is a planting bed, and what I've done here is they're spaced 15 feet apart, and each planting bed gets sort of raked-ish, cleared, and then either side of the planting bed gets logs. So the first step is fell the trees just a few at a time, 1 at a time, 2, 3, 4, 5 at a time, buck them up, get all the branches off. I throw the branches into the alleyways and the logs more or less close to the planting beds. Then I'm going to come through and I'm organizing the logs like this on either side of the bed. This one's a little wider, you can see. It's the first one I did, and I'm getting a little bit more precise about it. So the process is going to continue like this, where I'm taking all the big logs and bringing them close on either side to the planting bed, but leaving the planting bed itself relatively open. Now, the next step is I'm gonna continue chopping up the branches and sticks, and eventually once those are fine enough, and this is only chainsaw and machete, and I only got half a day, or maybe half a day help from one person so far. Other than that, it's just me, and it's not that many hours into it, maybe, I don't know, ballpark maybe like 20 hours of total work. So after I'm gonna come through, once I'm finished all the logs organizing on the side of the beds, I'm gonna come through the chainsaw again and touch it up so that all of these things, like this log, would be on the ground. Everything will be on the ground. Every log, they won't be stacked. They'll all be tightly packed and on the ground. And then I'll rake up the sticks. So this is an alleyway. Half the sticks will go to this to cover these logs. Half the sticks will go to cover these logs. And then I'm gonna leave it like that for the rest of the winter. And then in the spring, I'll rake up the leaves to cover the sticks. So we have a nice bed that's gonna keep those logs moist, start to break down. And then in the bare spot here, I'm gonna seed probably peas and oats, but a fast growing annual cover crop will go in here once these alleyways are cleared out. And as you can see, there's quite a bit more work to do, but this is the amount of material that we're looking at. I'm standing on probably like a foot to 18 inches deep of machete chipped sticks. So when this half goes over there and this half goes over there, and then that gets covered with leaves, it's actually going to be a really nice compost bed. Just a quick note on methods. It looks kind of like a crazy mess, but as I chop the branches up with the machete, I really make sure that I hit the corners. So like right here, my machete would hit this corner there and not leave a hook. If you leave hooks everywhere, the material becomes impossible to move. But if you clean the hooks up and you hit in the crotches of branches, it's not that fast, not that slow of a work. It's relatively fast, and you end up with material that's actually pretty movable. Like I can pick this up with a fork and move it without too much of a fuss. If you leave hooks, it's all locked together and you can't really move it very well. So that's just a little tip. Anyway, so logs, sticks, leaves, cover crop, and then in the spring, the beds themselves are going to be dug, loosened, and planted. I'm going to talk about the whole planting plan in a separate video, but it's multi-species, multi-strata, successional agroforestry planting, with the eventual goal of high-producing fruit and nut. So probably not 100% sure what the species are all going to be. Could very well be a chestnut overstory with a complex understory, but I'm going to leave that for a different video because that is a complex enough topic. This is just process of how do you take an early pioneer or secondary stand of trees that have senesced, and here's some black locust. The tops are very brittle, they're cracking in the wind, some of the branches are dying back. These trees are in the beginning of senescence, and same goes for all of these. This is facing east, and all of these have yet to come down. We need the eastern sun to come in for the tree crops to thrive. So those are gonna come down. I'm gonna harvest some poles out of here for a pole barn. These are nice black locust poles right there. Poplar is just great on the ground. I'm gonna quick cut a chainsaw line down the log once it's down and just thumb in some oyster mushroom spawn. Those black locusts to the north will come down, and then the rest of that will stay there as the northern boundary of this clearing. And then the workflow for the season is going to be, once all these alleyways are nice and cleaned up and the cover crop is growing vigorously in there, that's gonna provide mulch to go on top of the mulch beds that are on either side of the row. Because the worst is if you just pile up logs relatively loosely and then put sticks on top, the chances that you'll grow really strong perennial weeds are good, unless you can really provide enough mulch. So the alleyways are mainly going to be providing mulch, biomass, and lots of life, lots of new vigor into the soil, and that is going to be scythed off to the sides to recover those beds at least twice in the season. So I'll do an early cover crop of peas and oats, and then possibly a second cover crop that'll include a perennial bunch grass in it of some kind. This soil is fairly mesic, so it could handle some pretty high producing bunch grasses. And I don't think I'm going to be growing any crops in the alleyways. That could be done if this was, if you needed to produce everything in here, you could grow your peas and oats in there and then grow a veggie crop in the middle of that. I have plenty of other spaces for growing veggies, so I don't need to do that. I'm really focusing on establishing the trees here. And then I have to cut all these stumps flush so that I can scythe whatever is growing in the alleyways. This one's there's still some sticks in there, but this will all be clear. So whatever's growing in there, I need to be able to scythe it. So I want to have a pretty clear boundary between the mulch row and this open space. And yeah, so that will be scythed. There will be regrowth from the stumps, so that I'll have to scythe those off a few times so that they don't stretch and get too big. But when I come back here late in the spring, you'll see how alive this place will be. All these trees are alive, and they are going to sprout with an incredible vigor that they haven't put out for decades. So that's going to be really exciting to see how much grows in here. And my first harvest will probably be putting a deer stand up there and being able to hunt this little patch as well. That's not the main goal, but I will need to do that to keep the trees alive, because this is going to be, there's a whole lot of forest around here that doesn't have very good succession because of super high deer population around here. And so they're gonna be very drawn to this site. In fact, they already have been. Over winter, they get really hungry, and if you cut a tree down, all those buds that were out of reach are in reach. So there's actually tons of deer manure in this area and lots of deer signs. So that's kind of interesting, and it reminds me how much disturbance and animals go together. There used to be all these megafauna here that would have been doing stuff not as extreme as this, but knocking trees over when they got old to get, they didn't necessarily think that they were going to reinvigorate, but that's what they were doing. I don't know what they think, really. Anyway, that's the process: cutting trees down and organizing big, medium, small, making a really tight pile, and then cover crop and tree crops. So yeah, it's a pretty big change from what I had initially envisioned, but I'm pretty happy with the direction it's taking.